So, welcome to part 2 of Regenerative Medicine, and then we're going to talk about some other things. So, there's a way of looking at the current state of regenerative medicine with transplantation as an analogy. That in the beginning, transplantation was really controversial and the results were terrible and people thought maybe they should stop and so on. And so the analogy only goes so far because that was back in the 1950s when they began, and now we are a lot farther along than that. But so this is a picture of the first operation at Massachusetts General Hospital between identical twins, so on, in 1954. So that's how transplantation began. And when did it really become routinely successful? In 1983, so that's like 29, 30 years. So before cyclosporin, the immunosuppressive therapy was not really fine-tunable enough and potent enough to provide routine success. So if there's an analogy, does that mean we have to wait 30 years before regenerative medicine is really routinely successful? Well, I mean, there are two ways to look at it. If you think about the exponential change kind of thing, you know, you can say, well, 30 years then might be 3 years now. On the other hand, there are things that might make it remarkably slower, and one is that Moore's law is muted by a whole lot of factors in medicine because of the regulatory climate and the motivation for progress and so on. So it might take a lot longer for the end of the Wild West period. And what would constitute the end of the Wild West period? Like, talking about in regenerative medicine getting the right cells in the right places, do you have to get all the right cells in all the right places? Probably not. Do you have to have every single cell type in there that is normally there? Probably not. But if you think about it, like in the kidney, there's a specific cell type that makes renin, specific cell type that makes erythropoietin and so on. Each of those 52 approximately cell types that we think are present in the kidney is probably important in its own right. But at some point we would come to a kind of compromise understanding that although we can't get all the cells in the right places, that it's still worth doing the procedure. But we do not need to feel embarrassed if the classification reflects Wild West features. Like many people, when you talk about the classification of transplant rejection, still talk about hyperacute rejection, even though hyperacute rejection in the modern era never occurs. It's due to preformed antibody. You would never transplant a patient in that circumstance. But what hyperacute rejection used to look like in the old days is quite similar to some of the problems that we have with regenerative medicine now, with the main blood vessels clotting. And so there's a kind of analogy there. Hyperacute rejection is similar to regenerative medicine attempts with vessels lacking endothelium. Well, everything looks fine until you hook it up to the blood supply, and then the artery and vein clot, and the rest is not very pretty. So there other things that are kind of intriguing, like in all other organs except the GI tract, where the stem cells hang out, the stem cell niches are really sort of exotic and hard to figure out. But the discovery that the renal papillae is the area, is like one of the main stem cell niches in the kidney, that also harkens back to an older time period, because there was a time that everybody knew that papillary necrosis brought about by aspirin, phenacetin, caffeine combinations and other drugs like that were a really important cause of end-stage renal disease. And now that it's completely disappeared, it's disappeared in part because our culture's different. If you think what you do on breaks in a job, and what does the phrase "take a powder" mean? Take a powder was you'd be working along, and then the break would come. Rather than having coffee, you'd go out and scoop a handful of this aspirin, phenacetin, caffeine mixture and sort of pop it in. People just don't do that anymore. It's not cool. It's not popular, and so therefore papillary necrosis doesn't occur anymore. There's no other condition in the kidney that is sort of specific to the innermost part, the sort of pointy tip end of the inner medulla. And so we tend to forget about that area, but that is where stem cells hang out. Just to give you an idea of things that may come and to some extent exist now, there's a kind of Biopen where in the operating room you can squeeze progenitor cells or stem cells, like for cartilage and bone into area where they're needed, and kind of draw it in a pattern of what the patient needs. So quite a lot has changed. If I think of this presentation that I gave just 3 years ago, it seems like we've moved on quite a bit. On that occasion, there was somebody sort of lying in wait for us. We had this electronic poster, and she wanted to talk with us. Her name was Peppar, and she's like an expert in extracellular matrix. And that just adds, I and most people don't understand it terribly well, but it's very important as the sort of milieu in which cells develop and differentiate. And what goes on in the extracellular matrix has much to do with the success of regenerative medicine. It's just one of many areas we don't really understand very well yet. So that's the extra bit that I wanted to tell you about regenerative medicine, and so hopefully you found that informative. Okay, there are 2 other slides now. This one is from the first lecture. So the midterm, even though Jonathan White has not presented here, will cover the second half of his TEDx talk. So you should watch that from approximately minute 6 minutes 40 seconds on. He and I were just talking about how some students actually prefer video performance of their lecturers to live performance. And speed them up, you can, you don't have to get dressed to watch. There are all sorts of more convenient things. So he is feeling philosophical about the fact that wasn't able to teach you guys face-to-face, but happy that he's still a part of the course. Similarly, Rich Sutton didn't teach you, but you need to know what's on this slide, which is, I think, the only logical opinion to hold about AI safety, but it's very much a minority opinion. There was this meeting on AI safety. Rich Sutton was the only person from the U of A there, and the only person who was sort of defending sentient machines. When they are as smart as we are, we should treat them as equals and include them in our circle of empathy. Give up the idea that human beings need to be in charge of the world forever, even if we're not as good at it as another group of beings. So you need to know this. Step 1, lose your sense of entitlement. Step 2, include AI in your circle of empathy. And you can watch Rich on video, and hopefully he'll be back teaching in the course, and maybe Jonathan might go to next year. So any questions about any of this or anything else? I don't have anything else for you today, so this may be a rather foreshortened session. So on Thursday, for those of you who may want to talk to Simon Wu is going to be here a half hour before the class begins, in other words, between 1:30 and 2. And you can talk with him and me about the quantum biology part of the exam, and that same opportunity is during the main lecture on the 17th, where Simon will be here during the regular lecture period, and he and I will lecture together. Otherwise, you don't have any lectures, so you have one today, you have Patrick Larsky on Thursday, and then you have one on the 17th, and you don't have any lecture on the 15th or on the 2 teaching days the week after. So the idea is you should watch those 4 videos on your own and be ready for the midterm on the 29th. The other lecture that week is quite interesting about self-driving cars, so that's on the 31st. And you've already met the other one who did that lecture. She says she's not an expert, but on the other hand, her graduate program is entirely about the self-driving car, so she is kind of an expert, and I think it'll be a useful discussion. So any questions about any of this? Yeah?
For the quantum biology, I started watching the videos, and there's a part about the history and like the founding fathers of like Newton and all that. Do we need to know names like that, or just quantum biology?
No, you just kind of need to know the big picture. But on the other hand, if you think about it, it wouldn't hurt you if you accidentally learned some of those names, right? I mean, it's not like it would clutter your mind, or people would think you're a boring person because you know that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I feel. I think that it's good for you to watch those lectures, but to do it in a non-anxious way, not feeling like, gee, I can't read that word, and oh my God, maybe he's going to ask that on the test. We're not going to do that. We're going to ask you like big concepts and stuff like that. And so not anything detailed or minute. And there's no like multiple choice. They're all short answer questions and you get a choice which ones to answer. I think there are 7 and you answer 4. So, you know, the worst case scenario isn't that bad. If I'm lying to you right now and I really do ask you about Newton or something, you can skip over that question and go on to the next. Yeah.
Is that just for the quantum biology? Or
Yes.
Okay, there's still
Yes.
multiple choice.
Yeah, so there is multiple choice, yeah, but not the ethics is a separate like paper component, and it's graded by Gary Goldsand, and the quantum biology is also a separate paper kind of thing of short answers. And Simon and I will look over it and then send it on to Jack, so it gets looked over by 3 people, but yeah, and then we'll put those scores together to give the totals.
So there's only 2 parts?
No, there's 3 parts. There's, there is the kind of general midterm exam with that has multiple choice and short answer and stuff. Then there is a specific paper on ethics that has short responses to things, and similarly another separate paper on quantum biology. And it will take approximately the time period that you have. It won't take more than that. But the students really complained when we gave them exams, like only took 30 minutes or 25 minutes. They thought they were completely cheated. So anyway, trying to sort of fill up the class period for most of you, and maybe the slowest student, it might take the whole class period. But yeah, so anyway, that's kind of the plan. Any other questions? Okay. Yes?
For the ethics in quantum biology, you keep saying paper, so is it like?
No, it's just, you know, like we're handing out to you 3 things, right? One is like the rest of the exam, and the rest of the exam I will grade. And then one is the ethics. I think it's 2 pages stapled together. And that probably also has choices. I don't remember. So they're not as long as they look, because you don't have to do them all. You don't have to do it to a certain portion. So, yeah, there's nothing, you know, there's a question there and a space for a short answer on another question. Yeah, it's nothing exotic.
And for the multiple choice, you said it's like still pretty general questions and all, like, I don't know, especially for stuff like the AI lectures. I don't know how.
Yeah, so it is still pretty general. So there aren't very many multiple choice, but the ones that are there have to do with my lectures or Osmer's, and yeah, so they're not terribly difficult or challenging. Yeah, I realize a possible problem this year, which we've never had before, is, you know, the students used to feel that they didn't have enough time to really talk to us about what the midterm was going to be like. Maybe this time you get too much time, like you get today, and then you get 1:30 to 2 on Thursday, and then you get the 17th, and you know, maybe you'll be so bored with the midterm by the time it actually comes, and oh yeah, here it is. So anyway, but that's just the way this year has turned out. It's a more dynamic course than most, you know. I mean, you would think I'd be able to put together the lecture schedule months beforehand, but nobody cooperates with that. So I have to like do it right before the course starts, and then, you know, there are all sorts of surprises that come up. So that's how it turned out. All right, so any other questions? So Patrick Larsky on Thursday, and if you are able to, there's no, there's no like bonus if you're here for the 1:30 thing, because I realize some of you have other classes before this and others don't. So yeah, it's just an opportunity. So Simon wanted to be here for every quantum biology lecture and basically give them all, but he does have another required course at exactly the same time as this one, so yeah, it just didn't turn out. So that's what happened. Okay, thank you for coming, and we'll see you on Thursday.